separate one. There was a
Morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Pax Americana. I'm Julie Roginsky here with Olga Lautman. What's going on, Olga? How are you?
I'm good. Lots going on, as always.
Yes, you had quite a Substack week this week. I want to just let people know I had the really big pleasure of interviewing Alex Vindman yesterday. He was in New York. And we did a podcast together live in person, which is rare. And he is just phenomenal. And we spent, he's running for Senate in Florida, Olga. And of course, he wanted to talk about domestic politics, but we spent a lot of time talking about foreign policy as well. And he's just so incredibly thoughtful and wonderful. And I really look forward to getting that podcast out into the world in the next few days. And in the meantime, if you live in Florida, or even if you don't live in Florida and you have a few bucks to give to his campaign, you should, because he is in a very good place. He could potentially turn Florida blue this year, which would be phenomenal. I don't know why everybody's focused on Texas, because I think Florida, with him at the top, is right for the picking this year. But anyway, he would be wonderful to have in the Senate. Just thoughtful and not a knee-jerk guy at all, and just a great candidate. Okay.
Both him and his brother. And just so people know, he's been a target of the Russians. I cannot even begin to tell you the unhinged conspiracies that they have circulated tied to Ukraine over since the full-scale invasion. I mean, he's like literally one of their top.
Yeah.
But not for U.S. politics, specifically for Ukraine.
Yeah. We didn't really talk much about that because that's, I only have about 45 minutes with him, but nevertheless, he's just, he's phenomenal.
Nice.
Okay. And Ohio Sherrod Brown, absolutely Miss Binks. The two races that I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about Texas too, but if we could get him and Sherrod Brown into the Senate, Sherrod Brown, who I remember and knew back when he was a House member, is really one of the more thoughtful, wonderful members of Congress and the Senate that has been around in my lifetime. And so it would be wonderful to have Sherrod back in the Senate. And maybe this year is the year to do it. Okay.
I think so. If any year to turn even Texas, it would be this year, because it's like like they say, all the stars are aligning thanks to Trump and his fuckery, and Republicans. Literally, like everything is aligning for Democrats to have the best chance ever.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I have a crazy little puppy running around here, so I apologize.
Oh, how's the Munchkin? We
Munchkin's a little
to us last week.
Oh, she's a little terrorist. There you go. We're trying to potty train her, and it's not working out. So I have this apartment that is, oh God.
And how's Haggerty with her? Did you get her name yet?
Yes, her name is Maggie.
We were between Maggie and Beans.
Well, we've got Hagrid, who we call Haggy, so between Maggie and Haggy. Haggy is very confused as to why in the world we would ever need to replace him with another dog. He feels very betrayed, but he's getting so much love from my husband, who also refuses to acknowledge that we have another dog, that I think he's okay. And my poor son, who theoretically was the one who wanted this dog, and of course, like, I'll get up with her in the middle of the night to potty train her, and now when she starts barking in his room before he's like going nuts. He's like, Mom, can you take her? I'm like, nope.
I know. They're so full of promises.
No.
I think we need to skip this Pax Americana this week and just focus on the dog.
I can certainly, the dog is currently assaulting a squirrel toy that at her right now. She's literally like trying to tear this little toy squirrel that's like half her size apart. So as soon as she's done with that, I will go get her. Okay, I will get through. I will show you the puppy as soon as she's done. I wish you guys could see what I'm seeing. She's literally on her back with her legs up in the air, fighting a squirrel.
Like a little baby. Oh,
like a little baby. Yeah. She's totally nuts. All right. Okay. So Olga, where to begin this week? The one thing Vindman did say is he thinks Putin's like on his last legs. I don't know if you agree with that, but he's certainly acting like somebody who's desperate. And so what he is doing is assaulting Europe in ways that are just being ramped up. But I want to first talk about us and the continual destruction of the Pax Americana, which I want to stress again has kept the Western world, I should say, safe for 80 years until Donald Trump showed up. The United States,
Sorry to interrupt you, but I was watching an interview. I don't even know what it was. I honestly was working and had the TV in the background, and someone said, "Oh, we're halfway through his term," and I'm like my eyes lit up. I looked up and I'm like, "Oh my God, we're almost halfway." So if we survive, maybe Pax Americana will survive.
maybe.
Carry on, all yours.
Yeah. Well,
all yours.
As desperate people grow more desperate, like Trump, Trump can't pull the United States out of NATO. There's a law that says that you can't do that without congressional approval. And of course, he'll never get that. So he's basically trying to leave a shell of NATO there, but destroy it from within so that it doesn't really mean much. And one of the things that he's doing, Politico woke up and did a story on this, which I find fascinating, considering who they're owned by. Trump officials informed NATO allies that the United States plans to gradually reduce the number of strategic bombers and fighter jets and drones and submarines and warships that they're assigning to NATO operations in Europe. It was revealed during a closed-door NATO meeting. Of course, it got out. There is a war happening in the European continent. I mean, I don't understand what's hard to get about this. Like, this war that the Ukrainians are fighting, they are fighting on behalf of Europe and the United States.
They are Europe. Yeah, it's a European city.
And if Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance weren't such arrogant assholes, they would have called Zelensky before deciding to go on their little Iran adventure and say, hey, President Zelensky, you have been fighting a much bigger, stronger, more militarily advanced power, or was originally militarily advanced, with drones and at a fraction of the cost that the Russians are spending on their military adventurism. Tell us, because it's possible that the Iranians might try to emulate what they learned from you. Tell us what we can learn from you too. But of course, they didn't do that. This is all connected, as you and I talk about. We're in World War III. Ukraine was the first theater. Iran is the second theater. I guess we're about to have a new theater in North and South America, because Venezuela has certainly not finished. And now we're about to go launch a war with Cuba. So, there's all sorts of questions that are being asked. And, what do we think here?
And between your dog and my birds that won't shut up, my birds have a lot to say. Yeah. So last Friday was actually, or maybe even the day right after we got off, actually. It was the day after we finished our Pax Americana. That Politico came with an article about this newest, or no, actually, sorry, it was this week. So many things happening. But yeah, so they came out with us. This is on top of Reuters reporting. And basically the reporting is the same, that the U.S. is pretty much done with NATO, that they're, pulling everything out. We see the troops being pulled out, although Trump did do a reverse. That happened last week. I laughed because I was like, oh, they must have watched our show, because they were so busy campaigning for the Polish president.
Keep talking. I'm going to get this done because she's pregnant. So. Continue.
They were so campaigning so hard for the far right president that it was strange to pull American troops out from Poland, or at least cancel their rotations. Interestingly enough, literally right after we did, that was what happened. Right after we did finish our show, a few hours later, Trump put out a Truth Social that he now has changed his mind and remembers how much he loves the far right Polish president that they campaigned for. And then now he's upping the troops to 5,000. It's not 4,000, now it's 5,000. Then there was some weird reporting that came out, that he called Hegseth to question him, like, why did this happen? How did this happen? And whatnot. Whatever it is, something is going on, but we do know the bigger picture. Besides Poland, we do know the bigger picture is that Trump wants to throw a wrench into NATO. He wants to basically deem them, ineffective. This is something the Soviets worked on since basically the creation of NATO, to contain the Soviet Union and the spread of communism. And that's it. And I mean, I don't think that Russia's security services, nor the KGB, nor the now FSB, SVR could ever even imagine this scenario. But here we are. On the brighter side, because there's always a brighter side, Europe does need to wake up. For far too long, they did kind of, sit back and say, well, we got this. If anything happens, we got this. This is scrambling them to not only increase their military production, but I actually sat down and did a comparison chart. They have a bigger population than the United States. They have more military, like 3 times more military than the United States. They have 3 times more population than Russia. Russia's at 150 million approximately. EU is at 450 million, plus UK is like another 70 million. That's 520 around. And then if you add the greater Europe, all of Europe, then that takes you into 700 plus million. So I mean, they have the money, they have the resources, they have the defense production capabilities. I mean, Germany, German and French missiles, and just in general, their defense conglomerates are very advanced. So they need to shift over to this because, if anything, if we ever somehow heal this fracture in Pax Americana, America will benefit from having a stronger Europe that can defend their territory, that can defend Taiwan, that can defend Japan, South Korea, and that's if we ever.
Here's my concern. Europe, of course, is not a monolith. The United States is a monolith in the sense that we have one president at a time, and the Russians get that, which is why they are funding the far right in Germany, which is making gains. Which is why they are funding the far right in France, which stands a very good chance of winning the next presidential election, which is why they are funding Nigel Farage, quite literally, in the United Kingdom. And for anybody who's British on this chat who says Farage can't win, well, I hope you're right.
Never say never.
Yeah, never say never. We also thought that about Donald Trump too. And, they failed in Hungary, but all you need is one, which is what Hungary was for them, to stymie a lot of this stuff. And if you remember how hard it was to get Hungary to agree to admit new NATO members a few years ago, the Scandinavian countries, Finland and Sweden. So I say all of that to say that that's the part about Europe that frightens me, is that right now, as we sit here today on May 28th, 2026, excuse me, I'm getting things are fine in the sense that Europe is unified. Even Giorgia Meloni is unified in Italy, and with NATO, even Erdogan is not going too nuts.
Yeah, no, he's always actually the Turks are privately have always been supportive because of the Tatars in Crimea. So the 14, they've been supportive since Russia.
Yeah, and Iran on their doorstep is not helpful. Iraq and Syria, they've got a lot of stuff going on. They're much more concerned about the Gaza stuff than anybody else, and so on. But what is concerning to me, very concerning to me, is that you are on the cusp potentially of the Russians picking off one major European power, most likely France, potentially next year, but we'll see. Terrifying. I mean, terrifying. And that's where the United States, to me, still continues to be the indispensable nation, because if you just have one country having veto power over NATO, and the EU for that matter, that becomes a really big problem. And that's why we still need to be there, and we still need leadership. And I asked Vindman that yesterday, and I said, listen, I'm not going to give away what he said, but my question for him was the first time, if you're European, you look at the United States, the first time was an aberration. You could say, well, they went nuts. They didn't know what they were getting into. The second time was a pattern. And if you're Europe, you're like, I mean, again, if I were an American asset, intelligence asset, anywhere in the world right now, particularly in the Kremlin or anywhere in Russia or China, I would be terrified out of my mind. And what people don't remember, and you and I both talked about this, Olga, I think you've talked about this, is that during Trump's last administration, there was a very weird spate of American intelligence assets who were killed all over the world. Yep. Why in the world would you want to help the United States now, understanding that the President of the United States may personally hang you out to dry, or anybody else in the administration who has access to who you are to unmask you? I mean, it is just terrifying. And that's something we all have to consider. I mean, we all have to think about it. And it's going to be a long time, maybe a generation or two of good governance here in the United States until we get right with our Western allies, because the truth of the matter is, who's to say that even if we elect, I don't know, make this up, JP Pritzker next year, Olga Lautman, whatever, you can't be elected, you weren't born here, but any American, any good functioning Democrat or even Republican who's pro-NATO, who's to say JD Vance is not going to be elected after that? Like, we have shown what we're capable of, not once but twice.
I agree 200% with you. The one thing I will say, Russia runs obviously the best information operations. Look at America, look at Canada, look at all of Europe. Ukraine was a laboratory for this. I mean, they started this in the 2000s. I mean, everyone remembers the first revolution, the Orange Revolution, after Russia interfered in elections there, and Yanukovych. I mean, the scale of fraud was so significant that the Supreme Court basically, canceled that election after big protest. The one thing I will say, and this was something very interesting and something that I kept close eye on, after the full-scale invasion in 22, there were many of us who were worried, like that the border cities like Kharkiv or others would actually fall and move with the Russians, because I can't even tell you the amount of Russian propaganda through, for instance, Kharkiv, with through the church, through everything. I mean, anywhere you go, it's just they repeat Russian propaganda over and over and over because it's just so prevalent. Once the missiles fell, everyone remembered they were Ukrainian. I mean, 90% of Ukrainians remembered you're Ukrainian, and they're Ukrainians, and they stood and chose and fought for Ukraine. I'm saying this because it's the same thing. Right now, Russia's, what I learned, Russia's disinformation operations, and in general, MAGA's disinformation operations.
But you repeat yourself.
How wonderful, huh?
But you repeat yourself, because it's the same thing.
Yeah, MAGA's, their disinformation, like, on how wonderful the economy is. That, might have, like, on the flip side, they said how horrible the economy is. That disinformation might have worked. But now, when people have to experience it with their own pockets, that's it. So with that being said, in Europe, all the far right, you see with Trump, perfect example. The MAGA brand was so hot across Europe. Now the MAGA brand is beyond toxic. Even with the far right, after the Iran war, they basically, burned Trump, and they don't want nothing to do with Trump, like not AFD, nothing. Like, it became a shame to be associated. So information operations work, but when missiles and drones start falling, people, I think, will remember, whether you're far right or far left or in between or not politically aligned. If you're in France and you see drones attacking your beautiful, city, you're going to remember that you're, French, and that you need to defend France. So that's the one thing I will say. For out of everyone, the biggest loser, it's going to be the United States, because Europe has Ukraine, which is the probably most significant asset that anyone right now can have in the world. I mean, you see even the Saudis and UAE and, Qatar is like, going to Ukraine to get drone expertise and whatnot, because Ukraine is the only one who's fighting an actual hot war in
Yeah.
different circumstances. Um, so, but for US, Trump is destroying our reputation, because we're the ones right now. Trump can pull submarines and, strategic bombers and all of this. Yes, it's important, but right now we're moving into a new drone warfare. Type. It's no longer, tanks rolling through cities. Now it's drones hitting cities, hitting airports and whatnot. So Trump can do this, we're going to be the biggest losers, because Europe can easily, in response, shut down their bases, shut down their airspace. Right now, Spain said U.S. can use the airspace. I watch all the time how U.S. needs to carry out some operation or refueling or move assets into the Middle East. They have to fly around Spain, because Spain will not let them use the airspace. Imagine this was across the whole continent of Europe, that they cannot fly.
You guys, it is problematic all across the board. I flew, you remember back, I guess, God, it was only 6 weeks ago or so, and 2 months ago, and I can't believe it's only been that long. But remember, I went to Asia, right? I flew to Tokyo from New York. We had to think about geographically, right? You fly over Canada, and sort of, and then you go down over the Pacific. We had to. I mean, if you look at a map, Russia is this close to Japan. And if you're flying this way from New York over Canada and you're going down, naturally you would be flying over Russia, except not this time, because we can't fly over. So Russians, I don't know why this. We can't, this is a thumbs down, not a thumbs up. But we couldn't fly over Russian airspace. We had to skirt this tiny, tiny, tiny patch of water that separates Russia from the islands of Japan. And that's a problem. I mean, that's a problem. And we are now at a point where we're prohibited, the military is prohibited from flying over parts of Europe. Commercial airspace, commercial planes are afraid to fly, or not supposed to be flying over Russia, which PS 1/5 of the world. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge country, so very hard to avoid it if you're flying east to west or west to east. All of this is tough. Tough.
Yep.
And so I don't know.
So U.S. is going to be the biggest loser out of this, because, I mean, if they lose the bases, for instance, if Europe wanted to retaliate, which they will not right now, but if they wanted to retaliate, for Trump throwing a wrench in NATO, I mean, frankly, they could be like the Russians and turn NATO into Fado or Mado or anything else, and minus the U.S., keep all their resources and assets in place, and then add, like I've said and I've advocated, add Taiwan and South Korea and Japan and others to the security, new security alliance, and they can easily screw the United States. Not only is the U.S. going to lose bases and whatnot, but don't forget intelligence. Intelligence is gold. Gold. And you're 1,000,000% right, that right now there's not one informant, whether you're in Syria or Afghanistan or Russia or anywhere, who would feel safe with, communicating with the CIA, or for that matter with FBI, because at any moment something might happen and they will unmask that file and decide to weaponize and politicize it. And we've seen this happen, with the first time around, and now this time Tulsi Gabbard declassified some information from, the 2016 election. So right now, I mean, this is gold. Intelligence is gold. That's more important than any tank, missile, anything, because if you have intelligence telling you something is about to happen, or providing you with information leading you closer to understanding a bigger picture or a plot, no amount of tanks or drones or missiles are going to be able to stop it if you don't have this information. And America again will suffer, and it's such a shame because we've always been the good ones. I mean, there are so many things I can criticize America for that they've done on the international stage, but when you look at the security order, we have always, pretty much knew what our role was. Right now, our role is to basically uplift China, Russia, and help them, hey, Claude, attack and seize Taiwan and attack NATO countries. That's basically our role right now.
Yes, Kaufman J5H. I know this is not the topic of discussion today, but you are correct. I just want to acknowledge your comment. I want to talk about what the Russians are doing as they get more desperate, because as we talked about earlier, they are launching a war not just on Europe, but they're actually targeting European officials. It was Ursula von der Leyen a few months ago when they jammed her GPS signal as she was landing, I believe, in Poland and almost crashed her plane. I mean, that was an assassination attempt, just to be clear.
Yep.
The head of the European Union. It's not talked about enough, but this was, World War I started for, began for less. And now there is a terrible story, also has not gotten the attention that it needs, unfortunately, from The Guardian, which is a wonderful newspaper and everybody should read it, but it's a British newspaper and it's not, this should be on the front page of the New York Times, this should be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It was not. A Royal Air Force jet carrying UK Defense Secretary John Healey had its GPS signal jammed for 3 hours while returning from Estonia. Again, remember, Estonia is one of the 3 Baltic nations that used to be part of the Soviet Union. It used to be a Soviet republic, and Vladimir Putin certainly considers it his, whether they're now his or not. His designs on the Baltics are just as great as his designs on Ukraine, and he will have the Baltics back if he's allowed to get away with what he's doing in Ukraine. So, of course, Healy went to Estonia, a NATO country, and the aircraft's navigation systems were disrupted and it forced pilots, again, much like they did in the Ursula case, to rely on backup systems. It is another assassination attempt, and this time it's an assassination attempt, to be clear, of the Defense Secretary of the United Kingdom. Now, the Russians have been humiliating the British for the last 2 decades. They have been poisoning people on British soil. They have been assassinating people on British soil. They have been operating on British soil. They are laundering money. I mean, London, the city of London is basically a laundromat, as is the real estate market in London for corrupt Russian money. The British have done not even nearly enough to counter all of this because their economy, in large part, I think they think depends on being a laundromat for the Russians, which is a crime and a shame on every prime minister going back to, I don't even know, I wouldn't say John Major, but it's been a long time. So certainly going back to Tony Blair. But I say all of this to say that, friends, this is for real. This is an assassination attempt on one of the highest ranking British officials. Much like a few months ago was an assassination attempt on the highest ranking European Union official. Europe's got to wake up. I mean, I think they have, but I don't know what's happening, obviously, in the intelligence world, but my God, why are Russian defense officials able to live their lives?
100%. And this started, I mean, I am beyond shocked that there hasn't even been a civilian aircraft that has been down, because this started, I remember very clearly, it was Christmas of 23, I believe, a year after the full-scale invasion, that Russia started jamming the GPS around the Baltics, around Finland, Sweden, Norway, and it has been just spreading. And they have targeted civilian aircrafts. I can't tell you the amount. I mean, there have been thousands of these incidents, thousands. and Europe has ignored it for the most part. But now you see with von der Leyen, when she was targeted, Putin was standing right next to Xi. I mean, what a message to send to the world as he's in China, that he basically okayed an attack on her plane, which again, they landed manually. But what if something went wrong? And what if the plane crashed and she was killed? And same thing here. Russia has been spreading a lot of disinformation and panic around the Baltic states the past few weeks. I honestly am keeping an eye, but I don't want to repeat and give more oxygen to it because I think this is just part of their information operations. And frankly, I've seen, some people who watch Russia blow it up, which is really pissing off the Baltic states because they understand better than anyone what Russia's capabilities are. Like Ukraine, you don't need to explain to them. Like Poland, you don't need to tell them and educate them on Russia. They have been the ones, who have been sounding the alarm. I mean, Estonia in 2007 was the first country, I think, on the planet to get hit with a state cyber attack that took down their financial systems and government websites and everything at the same time as Russia, I mean, attributed to Russia, at the same time as Russia was riling up their Russian population with this information and basically pushing and resulted in violent protest by the Russians, towards the border. So, I mean, if anyone knows, they know. After the full-scale invasion, it must have been like a few months that they started digging trenches on the borders and signed a pact, a defense pact, with their with all the border countries, basically to one, come to each other's defense if Russia crosses any of these countries, and two, to start building trenches and be prepared for Russia crossing over. So this has been happening, and I mean, Russia is really, really ramping up their information operations, and the fact that you have this, them now targeting the defense minister. I mean, this is the British defense minister. I mean, I'm not even going to put Hegseth into this because I consider him a drunk Fox News host. But what was our defense secretary prior?
Lord Austin. Lord Austin.
That's like targeting Austin or any other U.S. defense secretary. Can you imagine? This would be an act of war. And here they targeted, the British defense minister. And I mean, it is incredible that they have gotten this ballsy. But at the same time, it shows their desperation because they are doing everything to basically try to poke Europe to respond to them in order for them domestically to then initiate a mobilization and say, you see, we've been feeding you. Oh my God, I think this is from Soviet days, how NATO wants to bring us down. And you see, this is really what they're doing. So, I mean, right now, nothing more. I'm hot-headed. I frankly, in response would wipe out Kaliningrad and leave like dust there. But there has to be, I think, something in between my approach and the Europeans not doing anything. But right now, it would really work in Russia's favor if, like, for instance, Europe would send missiles towards Moscow in response to this. But at the same time, there are other ways to hit Russia where it hurts. London, you mentioned sanctions. They are now, Britain woke up and they are now going after all the sanction evasion schemes, which is hilarious because, I mean, UK, London, I call London grad. I mean, they might as well be part of
totally Leningrad. I mean, it's
by the amount of money that they have moved through there.
You go to Mayfair in London, and people who are British on this chat, tell me if I'm right. I haven't been to London. I was there last time, so I haven't been there. But I go to London quite often. You go to Mayfair in London, which for people who don't know is it's like the Upper East Side of London, one of the high-end parts of London. It's dark. The apartments are all dark. The townhouses are all dark because it is owned by Russian oligarchs. who park their money there in London real estate, which is obviously very expensive. And they don't actually live there, but it's a safe place to park their money. And, Belgravia, Mayfair especially, it's just astonishing to me, astonishing. And that the British continue to allow them to do it. It is astonishing how much money has been laundered through the city of London. It is astonishing that while this was all happening, Putin was poking the British by literally murdering people on British soil to whom the Brits gave sanctuary, former KGB agents and
with
others.
Chemical weapons, polonium.
With chemical weapons, with polonium. And
Novichok.
Yeah, and basically the Brits were like, oh, okay, that sucks. We're going to write a sternly worded letter equivalent. And in the meantime, please continue to invest in our country because we need the money. I think the problem is, and this is the part that also concerns me, is all of these are absolutely difficult political decisions because the more they spend on defense, the more they spend on foreign policy, the less they're spending on social services for their people. And of course, that's what people want. And of course, when that happens in places like France, the British go ballistic and the French go ballistic, and the French especially start having, their national pastime protesting because money is not going into social services, it's going to defense. So, and that leads to the rise of the far right. And that of course will eventually lead to the demise of NATO. And so I want to be clear that I understand politically why the current governments of Europe that are trying to hold off this right-wing wave, this populist tide, can't be as hard on this as you and I want to be. It's a very difficult situation. And Betsy, you're absolutely right. That's what happens in New York City. I am here in Manhattan, and I can tell you it's about 15 blocks from where I sit. There are high rises that are worth $100 million, apartments that are sitting empty because Russians wash their money, launder their money through the New York City real estate market. Not like Britain, but close. So I'm not suggesting it's the British.
Trump, they were laundering money through Tower on Fifth Avenue. Trump UN, the World Tower overlooking UN.
Yeah.
He had, I think, probably like 80% occupancy of Russians moving money, and this is Russian mafia and like Russian Kremlin officials moving money through it. I think Kellyanne Conway was like the only American in that tower.
Well, you talk to George Conway, and I'm sure he'd have something to say about that. So it's he's a lot more.
Sunny Isles, oh my God, they have everything. They actually have someone who is Spetsnaz, which is Russia's special forces. They had someone there who was, literally every branch of intelligence is in Trump's Sunny Isles.
You guys, La Maison de la Métier, which is the house that Epstein and Trump were both on, that ostensibly led to their split because Trump stole it from under Epstein, was owned by a Russian oligarch who sold it for a shitload more than it actually was, than it actually was worth.
He bought it $50 million a few months later. Rybolovlev sold it for almost $100 million. So Trump they pocketed $50 million. What's interesting was at the at an interesting point where Trump needed the injection of cash. Anyway, we could do a whole separate thing on Trump and Russian mafia laundering, but yes.
And we have go read our 20-part Substack that we did last year, and you will know all about it. Okay, one more thing. Well, a couple more things that were going on.
We'll skip through
recently. Yeah. Basically. Well, in addition to what we just talked about, the Lithuanians. So again, the Baltics are so on this. I mean, you have the Ukrainians, and I think aside from the Ukrainians, the Poles aren't as forthcoming verbally about this stuff as the Baltics are. But so we just talked about Estonia, Lithuania, which again, Lithuania, I just want to put in perspective. Lithuania used to be Polish, then it was a part of the Russian Empire, then it was part of the Lithuania has been the most battered, poor country, these poor people in the world when the Nazis came through, the Jewish population was decimated. Just brutal. If you want to, if anybody here has watched Fiddler on the Roof, Anatevka probably took place in Lithuania, was where the Jewish, my family came from Lithuania. But I'm sure your family, the Jewish side of your family, probably at some point was in Lithuania. It doesn't matter. The point is the Lithuanians warned that Russia has dramatically expanded its GPS spoofing capabilities from Kaliningrad. And again, I want to talk about Kaliningrad because geographically it matters. I wish we could always, when we have to do these shows, throw up a map of. Kaliningrad is it used to be Königsberg. It used to be part of Germany. And then after World War II, the Russians took it. It is the only part of Russia that is not contiguous to the rest of Russia. It is truly in Western Europe. It is basically German. Well, it was German. So think about geographically where that is. So it's basically become a haven for all of their signal intelligence, because they're so much closer to the west from there, and they can do a lot more harm. It's kind of in the northwestern part of Eastern Europe or Central Europe, if you want to call it that. Close to the Baltics, close to Western Europe, certainly close to Germany, close to the Scandinavian countries. It is an intelligence outpost, always was, even during Soviet days. Anyway, that's where they're expanding their GPS spoofing capabilities, because it's obviously closer to do from Western Europe to being Kaliningrad. And since early 2025, they increased the number of interference antenna from 3 to 36. I mean, think about that, more than tenfold just in the last year and 18 months or so. The system, according to Lithuania, can now falsify GPS signals up to 450 kilometers into Europe, which is about, Olga, about 300 miles or so, affecting parts of Poland, the Baltics, Finland, Sweden, and the Baltic Sea, while disrupting aviation systems, communication networks, and civilian infrastructure. And there you go. If you want to know how they were able to probably target this Defense Secretary Healy in flying to Estonia, probably from Kaliningrad. Again, think about all of us who fly over within 450 kilometers from Kaliningrad, right? Anybody who's flying from anywhere into Scandinavia, anybody flying into Germany, anybody flying into, certainly the Baltics. 300 miles, 450 kilometers is a lot.
Czechia.
I'm sorry?
Poland, Czechia.
Poland, of course, yeah. So, yeah, Prague, like all of it. So the point is, this affects all of us. And they can jam any of these signals, and you better pray to God that the pilot sitting behind your commercial British Airways flight or whatever else you're flying, United, has the ability to fly and has been taught to fly well without GPS. Terrifying.
It is.
And by the way, they're falsifying it. So I'm not even sure these pilots are aware that their GPS is telling them that they're going to the wrong place. And next thing you know, you fly over Russian airspace and they say that you're a spy plane because you flew over airspace that you're not allowed to fly over, and they shoot you out of the ground and out of the air. And if you don't believe that they do that, remember the flight. What was it? The Malaysia? Yeah.
Oh, forget that. Azerbaijan. I mean, this is actually why Azerbaijanis right now despise Russia, because of just a few years ago, it was a year and a half ago, they shut down their plane. Yeah. And then Russia, on top of it, had the nerve to say that they had nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, every single thing, like all the evidence pointed, and they got to the point they actually had to finally admit it, because there was really no denying. But yeah, in Malaysia flight, look, like I said, I personally would turn Kaliningrad to dust. Because after, and for people who are now tuned into Russia, this has been happening for a very long time. After the 2014 invasion of Ukraine, they started moving like the Iskandar ballistic missiles to Kaliningrad. Like they turned it into a military base.
I mean, it is an intelligence hub. It is a military base.
Absolutely.
Nothing good happens in Kaliningrad.
No, and the one thing I will say, which is still worrying for NATO, and this is something, already for a few decades they've been worried, is the Suwalki corridor, because that piece of, like a little piece of land, has leads to a blind spot for NATO. I mean, this is one of their biggest blind spots, and this is a blind spot for NATO, and this basically would connect like Belarus, and allow operations to run from Belarus to Kaliningrad. So Milwaukee corridor is one to always keep an eye on, because Russia one day will actually go for it. So.
Yeah. I'm trying to see how I can load a map here to show people what we're talking about. But I am very bad at this. Michelle Kinney is the GOAT when it comes to this stuff, and simply to say,
I will send out show notes. So send me the map, and I'll put the map in.
Let me just say this: Kaliningrad is basically just over a small strip of Baltic Sea, very close to Gdansk, which is in Poland. Not far from Warsaw at all, right on the border with Lithuania. It's right there, and truly just across the Baltic Sea, which is a small and narrow sea from Copenhagen. Right next to, not far from Berlin, Prague. It's Slovakia. I mean, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. No. And understand that the rest of Russia is separated from Poland and by a bunch of other countries, except for this little outpost there. So I mean, the bulwark for Poland has always been the Baltic countries and Belarus and Ukraine, but not for Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is right on the border with Gdansk, which, if people remember, was where Solidarity began. The Gdansk shipyard began, like Valenza.
Wipe it out and give it to Poland. I mean, to Germany.
Go back to Germany. I mean, as I said, it used to be Königsberg. I mean, that's what it was. So, okay. So that's incredibly annoying, and something that I think the media is not focusing on enough.
Nope.
And neither are Europeans, from what I can tell. And they're going to wake up one day and ask what the hell happened. And this is what the hell happened, because your governments are not ringing the bell, and neither is your media. And neither is our media. Let's talk about our favorite psychopath, Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia. Who threatens nuclear war on a daily basis, like crazy.
When he's not in a drunken coma, he has to wake up.
Legitimately, we have Twitter trolls who are not as nuts as Medvedev. So I just want to stress, but he's the guy Putin obviously sends out to be the bad cop. The worst cop, I should say. Putin's the bad cop. Medvedev was the worst cop. He threatened European Union diplomats who are in Kiev because Russia warned foreign nationals to leave Kiev ahead of the strikes that they had. They just hit Kiev with hypersonic ballistic missiles. 600 drones, 90 missiles. They killed at least 4 people. They damaged homes and schools and markets and water infrastructure, and also the Chernobyl Museum. I mean, these people are they're mass murderers. I don't know what else to say. I mean, everybody talks about a genocide in the Middle East, and I just want to talk about the fact that they're committing a genocide in Ukraine, because what a genocide is indiscriminate killing of a population irrespective of anything else, and that's what we're doing there. So if anybody here wants to go protest something on a college campus, you might want to start protesting that too. Russia's foreign ministry, run by yet another psychopath, but not as crazy as Medvedev, said that Russian forces would target decision-making centers and command posts in Kiev. Medvedev mocked the EU for maintaining its diplomatic presence and said that, quote, Europe had quote unquote diplomats to spare. Translation: we will kill your diplomats and you can always replace them with other diplomats. I mean, listen, like Europe keeps taking it and taking it and taking it. You go after the head of the European Union. You go after the defense secretary of the United Kingdom. You go after European diplomats and basically say, we're going to kill your diplomats, but don't worry about it because they have a lot to spare. My friends in Europe who are listening to this today, and there are people who were so blessed and honored that they're European viewers of the show and of Mayday and of Olga's Substack, certainly. Like, you got to write to your government. you gotta do something. Go talk to your MP and raise this, because this is crazy. They are trying to provoke Europe over and over and over again.
And the U.S.
Well, the U.S. is a lost cause while Donald Trump is president.
Because Lavrov called Marco Rubio for this also, and basically threatened that you need to get American diplomats out or they're going to potentially die, which Rubio told him, like, okay, thank you for letting us know, but our American diplomats are not going anywhere.
Yeah. But I do want to be clear of clear on what's going on here, which is just, Marco Rubio used to be on the issue of Russia, one of the strongest senators out there. And ever since joining this administration, he has been a complete and utter disgrace. Marco Rubio, I have even less respect for than for Pete Hegseth, because Pete Hegseth is a know-nothing drunk, whereas Marco Rubio knows better. And he knows better. In the meantime, however, Putin has been lying. Like, the paranoia for Putin has gotten so vast. He's apparently not seeing anybody. He's not meeting with anybody. He's completely become a recluse. He's probably hiding out in his $1 billion bunker. The Russian news agencies, which are all basically KGB, well, not KGB, but the successor to KGB related, which is TASS and RIA Novosti and Interfax, they've all sharply reduced their coverage of Putin since the start of the year. Mentions on official Telegram channels have dropped by the hundreds compared to the previous year. And that's because Russian authorities claim that Ukrainian drones targeted his Valdai residence. Is that the bunker, Valdai, or is that the one in the suburbs of Moscow, Olga?
No, that's a bunker, but he has bunkers everywhere. And paranoia. He has, probably a dozen locations with bunkers. And he mirrored them all the same. So whichever location he's having a meeting from on video, you will never know which one it is, because they all look identical. So, it's fascinating, just in that aspect.
Yeah. Valdai, just so people know, is, nowhere to be found. It is in the middle of nowhere. So that's,
and the Kremlin is up to something, because at the same time, there's a few things happening which are interesting, and we'll have to see where it goes. But for the past few months, they started this basically information operations that there's a coup about to happen. Shoigu, out of all people, which makes me laugh, is the one who is organizing the coup. With Shoigu, for anyone who knows, that guy is such an idiot that he wouldn't be able.
Let me say something about Shoigu, and this is not his own fault, but it just goes to underscore how absolutely racist Russians are. Shoigu is not a native Russian.
Yeah.
And he's Japanese, effectively, ethnically, I think. And the problem for Shoigu is Russians will never go for somebody who's not a native ethnic Russian. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think wasn't Stalin like
He was Georgian, but that's back when Georgia was part of the Soviet Union.
Now. True. But so there has been a lot of operations. But what is true, and I actually did write an article about it a few weeks ago. What is true is that Putin has stopped leaving Moscow publicly, having public events in Moscow and St. Petersburg. All his events are very curated. All his events are very like very staged, where he would normally go and shake people's hands. Although I'm sure that was, I mean, all his events are staged. Everything in Russia is staged, from the Soviet Union to now. Everything is staged. It's theater, but now, like, they don't even allow, like, they only allow a handful of people around him during these staged events, and they've been very far in between.
Well,
The last actual event that he went was, I think, Samurai in November of last year. That was the last event that he left. Had a public event outside of Moscow, so there's something happening, but at the same time.
I want to say this. He did show up last month for, I believe, for the Victory Day parade.
Yeah, no, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, they have events, but they're very staged and everything is, blocked with security and everything. Outside regions, he hasn't traveled. So this is where, the last outside region he went to was last November, which is kind of odd because when things are going bad, Putin will go and like, have this theater, like whether it's Dagestan or somewhere, where all these people are like basically falling over their feet to go and greet him and hug him and kiss him and whatnot. He hasn't had any of these, like love fest theater spectacles since last year, since November. But at the same time, my biggest worry with all this chatter happening, my biggest worry has always been that Russia is, when Putin like runs out his I guess expiration, the security services will replace him with someone else, and put basically to fool the West again. Like, here's our democratic new president, blame everything on Putin. So this is my worry, that I hope they're not preparing right now to swap out the face of the Kremlin, and then basically, say like, oh look, we're a democracy now, lift sanctions, and and yada yada. But something definitely is happening, whether it's solely information, or solely that there is something internally happening, or a combination. I suspect it's a combination of both. Something definitely is moving inside of Russia, and this comes as the economy is like getting worse. This comes as, again, they are running out. This is the first time since the October 2022, Ukrainians are taking back territory. Like, Russia is losing more people on the front line than the kilometers they're able to get. And Ukraine is slowly beginning to push Russians back. There was a report by the Brits, maybe that's why they targeted the defense minister, that 500,000 people have been killed in this war. Can you imagine? I mean, 500,000 Russians, talk about Russia's biggest fear is not being able to reproduce, and the declining birth rate.
He doesn't.
half a million people are dead.
He doesn't care.
No.
At this point, that's a long-term project.
That's why they're stealing Ukrainian babies.
Yeah, well, speaking of stealing Ukrainian babies, so I want to just end this on a depressing note, because this is a complete. We've been kind of hard on the Europeans today, but I do want to say that the most disgraceful thing happened actually at the hands of the United States, which is that this idiot, Rodney Mims Cook Jr., a name you probably haven't heard, this is the guy who is in charge of Trump's ballroom. He just went to
He's going in June.
He's going to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. That is Putin's big answer, I guess, to the G8 or whatever the hell he thinks it is. He's going for Putin's keynote address. And the part that is disgusting is, though this, what I just said, is not disgusting enough, because we have been boycotting this economic forum, rightly so, for years, is that he is planning on meeting with a woman named Olga Lyubimova, who is the culture minister of Russia, who is the woman who has been she's been sanctioned, and I believe there's an arrest warrant out for her, right, by the Europeans, or by the International Criminal Court, because she's the woman who has been stealing Ukrainian babies and taking them into Russia, children, and taking them into Russia and basically sending them to re-education camps and ripping them away from their mothers and their families. And when the trials begin, and I swear to the sweet baby Jesus, there better be Nuremberg-style trials on this. I mean, these people need to be in the dock. This woman, aside from Putin, needs to be first.
Absolutely, and
yeah.
she also not only is she organizing the stealing of babies, but she's also stole a baby for herself. But more so, I agree 2,000,000%. But more so, it's very interesting that Trump's ballroom guy is going to Moscow to an economic forum, which is like Putin's crown jewel, because that's where they not only honeypot Western business people, but arrange all the business deals and everything to compromise people and whatnot. I mean, this is like the biggest event of Russia. It used to be like that Europeans and Americans were like clamoring down to get to the economic forum. Last year, if you watched the year before, I mean, they pan out and it's like a snoring Taliban who are sitting in the rows. Like it has turned into, like obviously normal countries are boycotting it. And here you have Trump's ballroom commissioner going there, and he's not only doing the ballroom but also the arch and everything else. My concern is, why is Trump's ballroom guy going to this forum? What is he going to do? How did this meeting get arranged? And exactly. And I mean, not only that, I mean, are they going to send Russia security services to help build the ballroom, to advise the bunker underneath the ballroom?
Well, Putin does have a lot of experience with bunkers.
Exactly. So this is something that we need to keep an eye on. The forum is June 3rd to 6th or 8th. I think 6th, June 3rd to 6th. I will be peeled to Russian news to see what in the world is happening. But this is something, I mean, it's not normal for some Rodney Cooks who no one's ever heard of, who's handling Trump's ballroom, to fly suddenly to Russia. Mind you, there haven't been Americans there for a decade. I think the last person there, it must have been 2016 or 17 was the last time Americans attended.
Right. And I just want to be clear. You said, Jay Sartori, you said this is like we're all living in the late 30s, early 40s. Yes, if Charles Lindbergh was the president and not Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, it's worse. It's worse. And yes, we are on the cusp of war, and the war has already begun. And much like the Spanish Civil War and what was going on in Asia in the 30s was the precursor to World War II. What is happening right now, again, in Ukraine and Iran, and about to happen in Cuba, is World War III. And the United States will be now fighting a war on two fronts pretty soon, potentially three eventually. To be clear, what's happening in Cuba is, I think Trump watched Godfather 2 and saw that it used to be a casino before Castro came to power and decided he wants to get into that Atlantic City action down in Havana. The reality is there is no plan. They're going to keep the same people in charge. They're going to, call it a day and a victory and shame on Marco Rubio because he is whatever family animosity he's working out as a Cuban American towards the Castros is being done at the expense of the Cuban people who are starving to death right now because they've cut off, it's awful. And also at the expense of Cuban people going forward, because believe me, my friends, this is not going to be a flourishing democracy they're going to put in there. They're not interested in building a flourishing democracy. Much like in Venezuela, there's more repression now of their dissidents than there was under Maduro, because now it's being done with the United States looking the other way.
And shame on Rubio, because his grandfather came here undocumented. He had a deport order. He fought the order and then ended up under one of the programs under either Bush or Reagan, or one of the programs. He ended up getting, amnesty and basically being able to stay in the country. And Rubio in the State Department, the first thing that they set up was the freaking fascist far right remigration office to basically strip non-white people of to denaturalize them, because this is what the movement of across Europe is with the far right groups. It's basically to remove all the others out of a country and to bring back white people into America. So this is shame on him on many fronts. I mean, everything, and for everyone pitching, that he's gonna be such a great candidate for the Republicans. I mean, shame on him for on every level, between Venezuela, Russia, Cuba, immigrants, everything that he's doing, because he knows what he's doing and he knows better because he was on the opposite side of every single issue on this. So.
And for people who have not seen this breaking news, Barry Weiss is replacing Tanya Simon, the head of 60 Minutes, with some outside flunky who's never worked in broadcast television. And I just want to say, somebody who knows Tanya Simon personally, she is one of the best people I know. She is a journalist. She follows in the footsteps of her father, Bob Simon, who used to be a longtime 60 Minutes correspondent. And in addition to that, she is a wonderful, wonderful woman on a personal level, which is how I know her. So what is happening to CBS, it might as well, it's becoming Pravda. It's becoming TASS. They are getting rid of the best. They got rid of Sharon Alfonsi yesterday. They got rid of Tanya Simon today. I believe that's going to lead to a walkout of all of these correspondents at CBS at 60 Minutes. I just want to note that as we're going live here and the news is breaking. Just devastated for my friend Tanya, who is just a phenomenal journalist and the best of what this country has to offer in independent journalism, and has built her career at 60. We worked at 60, product at 60 Minutes, all the way going back to growing up with a father who, Bob Simon. So, on that note, Olga, I'm just furious. I'm just devastated reading this news. I was hoping, I kind of suspected it was going to happen, but I was hoping it was not going to, because Tanya Simon's just phenomenal. Okay.
Yep. And this is how media gets corrupt.
And it's going to be at CNN next.
Oh, yeah.
Get ready for the Scott Jennings 8 p.m. primetime show. Okay. Friends, on that sad note, we are
That's a nightmare.
Olga and I and a bunch of other people are about to record yet another episode of The Illegals, our Americans Rewatch podcast. The new one is coming out tomorrow at 12:15, right after our Jeff Jarvis show. So please tune in. If you haven't watched it, go to our YouTube page at Mayday and just start from the beginning. We recommend that you actually watch the episode of The Americans. It's on Hulu. You can rewatch it there and watch our podcast. Okay. On that note, Olga, you and I will be back here next week. And everybody hang tight. It's a scary, scary time, but we are, somebody said this in the chat, we are in the majority and we will persevere because we are the people who matter and they are not. Okay.
And we're awake. That's the most important.
And we're awake. This bank should be more than weekly. I would do this daily with Olga, but we all have crazy schedules, but I agree. Saturdays for Sanity, Robert Carr is on Saturday, which is not tomorrow, it's on Saturday, but yes, we will be here for Saturdays for Sanity. And we'll be back with Jeff Jarvis, Michelle and I tomorrow at 11 a.m. to talk about the media. We'll have a lot more to say about what's happening in 60 Minutes and other things. And so on that note, bye everybody. Have a great rest of your day and we will see you really soon. Bye.
Bye. Bye.